young person, Daddy King took him to see the unemployment lines in Atlanta, saying, you know, we have regular meals at our house, but not everybody does. When King was doing summer jobs, he noticed that the workers were treated terribly, both white workers and black workers, because they didn't have unions. And when the Montgomery bus boycott came along, some of the people that came down to help were the United Auto Workers Union, the United Packing House Workers Union, Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters Union, Philip Randolph, Larry Rustin. Ultimately, out of the Montgomery bus boycott, King formed strong relationships with a whole raft of union people around the United States. And interestingly, he formed the strongest connections with the left wing of the labor movement. A lot of them people who had been either kicked out of the CIO or nearly kicked out. So, for instance, he became an honorary member of the International Longshoreman Warehouse Union, which was one of the ones that was purged from the CIO. He was very close to 1199 Hospital Workers Union here in New York City. District 65, Cleveland Robinson, was a real important sort of background person organizing the March on Washington. And he was fairly close to Walter Reuther. The United Packing House Workers is one of the great examples because that was a union that didn't get purged but almost got purged and fought to stay within the CIO. And the distinctive thing about the Packing House Workers Union was they had the strongest civil rights program of any CIO union in the 1930s and 40s. And Ralph Hellstein, the white president, and Russell Lastly, black leader in the union, both worked closely with King for a long, long time and helped form his opinions and his outlook on labor issues. And more than that, you know, why was the FBI always following King around? Why were they always calling him a communist? I mean, it seems so absurd that one of the most famous Baptist ministers in the world would be labeled a communist by the FBI, and that they would try to destroy him as a communist, or a communist dupe, they would say. Well, one of the reasons is that he had this association with the left labor people, and some of those people had been communists, or some were still communists. Jack Odell, who was in the National Maritime Union, who was ultimately purged from his union, was a real key organizer for King and helped write some of his labor speeches. One of his great ones is "If the Negro Wins, Labor Wins" in 1961, his speech to the National AFL-CIO. And Jack was involved in some of that writing. It was Jack Odell that John Kennedy told Martin Luther King in the Rose Garden that he had to get rid of. I mean, this was that important that the Kennedy administration tried to get him to get rid of Jack, and they did force him out for a while. In addition, it went further. King had associations with the victims of the Cold War. He gave a speech and helped support Henry Winston, who lost his eyesight in prison as a Smith Act victim. He petitioned for Carl Braden and Frank Wilkinson, who went to prison for supposedly being communists, but really because they refused to cooperate with the House Un-American Activities Committee. He was friends with Benjamin Davis, communist councilman from Harlem, also from Atlanta, Georgia, King's hometown. It wasn't because King was a communist, it was that he believed that civil rights and civil liberties are indivisible, and that people who were fighting on the side of the civil rights movement, who may be communists or maybe were communists, it didn't matter to him. He didn't see that as really an issue. Philosophically, of course, he would disagree, but it wasn't a philosophical issue. It was about fighting for the rights here and now. So my point here is that King had a fairly mature view, I think, of what he was doing long before Memphis came along. And he understood the labor relationships quite well long before they came along. In the King Papers in Atlanta, there's a whole series of speeches that he made to unions that are quite good, like most of his speeches are. And so you know, when I talked to Herbert Hill, the NAACP lawyer who was one of the great anti-discrimination advocates, and he told me that he thought King was a mystic and he really didn't know anything about labor. And I didn't know why he told me that he knew King and he knew these people, but everything I found in my research totally goes against that, which is that, you know, he may have been a minister and he may have been raised a certain way, but he had an affinity with working class and poor people. And my take on it is that he grew up around working class and poor people.